It all started with a simple misunderstanding, or at least that was how the historians would later frame it. At the time, to those who lived through it, it was something far graver, an act of aggression that demanded justice. Humanity had only recently stepped onto the galactic stage, its first tentative steps taken with a mix of awe and caution. They were the newcomers, the upstarts who had arrived late to the party but quickly made themselves known. The galaxy was an ancient and sprawling place filled with species that had existed long before humanity even began recording its own history. Among these elder races, the Skorran Hegemony stood tall. They were warriors, their empire forged in blood and steel, and they saw themselves as the natural rulers of their sector of space. When humanity's exploratory fleets and fledgling colonies began appearing along the edges of Skorran territory, the hegemony viewed it as an affront and didn't have time for interstellar trade. The hegemony viewed it as the incident that lit the fuse occurred in the Proxima Theta system, a quiet region of space rich in resources. Human miners had discovered vast deposits of a rare crystal known as keltrium, a vital component for advanced starship engines. Unbeknownst to them, the Skorrans had already laid claim to the system, though their claim was little more than a forgotten beacon left in orbit centuries ago. The first warning came in the form of a destroyed mining vessel, its crew vaporized in what the Skorrans called a defensive measure. Humanity responded with alarm, sending envoys to negotiate. To the humans, it was an error that could be corrected. To the Skorrans, it was an insult. When the delegation was ambushed en route to the hegemony's capital, it was no longer a misunderstanding. It was war. The Galactic Concord, the loose coalition of species that governed interstellar diplomacy, convened an emergency session. Humanity sent their best and brightest to argue for intervention. The room was a grand chamber filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size, their voices layered in a cacophony of languages. At its center stood Ambassador Elaine Carter, representing Earth and its colonies. Carter spoke with the calm authority of someone who understood the stakes. "This cannot stand," she said, her words translated into 100 tongues. "Human lives have been lost, and we demand accountability. We ask for justice. Not just for our people, but for the principles this concord was founded upon." The response was tepid at best. Many species sympathized with humanity's plight but were unwilling to antagonize the Skorrans. Others openly doubted humanity's resolve. "You are a species of talkers," one envoy said dismissively. "What can you do against the hegemony?" The Skorran ambassador, a hulking figure draped in ceremonial armor, spoke last. "Your kind are insects, crawling where you do not belong. Step aside before you are crushed." Humanity didn't step aside. Instead, they issued an ultimatum: reparations for the lives lost, an apology for the attack, and recognition of their right to the Proxima Theta system. The Skorrans answered with silence. In the quiet that followed, something shifted. Humanity had tried diplomacy, reason, and restraint, but when those avenues were closed, they turned to the one thing the galaxy had not expected: resolve. The war that followed would shake the stars. The war began in predictable fashion, or so the galaxy believed. The Skorran hegemony, with their vast fleets and centuries of military dominance, struck first. They targeted human colonies on the fringes of settled space, sweeping through them like an unstoppable storm. Their ships, built for intimidation as much as destruction, rained fire on the undefended settlements. To the rest of the galaxy, it seemed like an inevitable rout. At first, humanity struggled. Their military was young and inexperienced, cobbled together from Earth's nations and its colonies. The fleets they sent to intercept the Skorrans were outmatched, their losses mounting with each engagement. The news of these defeats spread quickly, broadcast across galactic networks as a grim warning to anyone who might dare to challenge the hegemony. The Skorrans were confident, almost bored in their superiority. But humanity was watching, learning. Every engagement, every lost ship became a lesson. Their engineers worked tirelessly, analyzing the Skorran tactics, their ship designs, and their weaponry. The humans adapted with a speed that shocked their enemies. When the first human counterattack came, it was not the desperate flailing of a cornered species, but the precise strike of one that had learned its opponent's weaknesses. The turning point came at Arxon, a Skorran fortress world deep within their territory. Arxon was a name that struck fear into the hearts of even seasoned commanders. Its orbital defenses were legendary: planetary shields, automated weapons platforms, and fleets stationed in permanent orbit. No one had ever breached it, let alone considered the possibility. When the human fleet appeared on the outskirts of the system, it was dismissed as a symbolic gesture, a feeble attempt to save face. But the humans didn't come to posture. They came to win. Their attack began with a weapon no one had seen before: adaptive AI-guided drones. Thousands of them swarmed the orbital platforms, moving with an uncanny precision that bypassed the Skorran defenses. Where traditional missiles and fighters would have been obliterated, the drones adapted, weaving through fire and striking weak points with pinpoint accuracy. Next came the kinetic bombardments. Humanity had developed projectiles that could bypass shields entirely, their speed and density overwhelming the very fabric of Skorran defenses. The fortress's surface cracked under the assault, its proud spires reduced to rubble. But the most shocking blow came from a weapon that humanity had kept hidden until that moment: the molecular destabilizer. It was a device that broke down matter at the atomic level, dissolving Skorran ships in a shimmering haze of energy. Entire fleets disintegrated before they could react. The battle for Arxon lasted a single night. By morning, the fortress world, once thought invincible, was in ruins. The Skorran survivors fled, their once proud military shattered. When the news reached the rest of the galaxy, the response was disbelief. Species that had once dismissed humanity now watched them with a mix of awe and fear. In a single night, the humans had accomplished what no one thought possible. The Skorrans, for their part, were shaken. Arxon had been their symbol of dominance, a cornerstone of their empire. Its loss was more than a military defeat. It was a humiliation. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The galaxy had witnessed the fall of a giant, and humanity, the upstart species they had mocked, was proving itself to be something far greater than anyone had imagined. The war had entered a new phase, one that would test not only humanity's resolve, but its ability to navigate the treacherous currents of galactic politics. With the fall of Arxon, humanity had proven its strength. But strength alone wasn't enough to win a war, not when fighting an empire as vast as the Skorran Hegemony. The Skorrans still commanded immense resources and legions of loyal worlds. To defeat them completely, humanity needed allies. Building alliances was no small task. Many species viewed humanity as unpredictable, an unknown variable on the galactic stage. The older, more cautious civilizations preferred to wait, watching from the sidelines as the conflict unfolded. Others, like the Zeltran Collective, saw the war as an opportunity to manipulate both sides for their own gain. But humanity was nothing if not determined. Their diplomats worked tirelessly, traveling to distant worlds and standing before councils of alien leaders to plead their case. "We are not fighting for conquest," Ambassador Elaine Carter would say, her voice steady and clear. "We are fighting for survival. For a galaxy where no one has to fear domination by a stronger power." Some species were swayed by humanity's vision of a fairer, more cooperative galaxy. The Caltheri Union, a race of traders and scientists, saw humanity's potential as a stabilizing force. They began sharing intelligence, revealing the hidden supply lines and weak points of the Skorran war machine. The Rulath Dominion, a smaller empire that had long been overshadowed by the Skorrans, joined humanity openly, eager for revenge against their old oppressors. But not every alliance was forged through idealism. Humanity understood that practical incentives were often more persuasive than lofty speeches. They offered advanced technologies to species willing to fight by their side, shield enhancements, adaptive AI, and even prototypes of their molecular destabilizers. To species that valued economic prosperity, they promised lucrative trade deals and access to human innovations. In fact, they were looking for long-term partnerships with the species willing to fight by their side. Shield enhancements and access to human innovations, the coalition grew, and with it, humanity's influence. Yet the Skorrans were not idle. Realizing the threat posed by this growing alliance, they sought to undermine it at every turn. Espionage, sabotage, and propaganda campaigns became their weapons of choice. They spread rumors of human atrocities, claiming that the fall of Arxon had been a massacre rather than a battle. Some in the galaxy believed these lies, and a few potential allies turned away in fear. Despite these challenges, humanity pressed on. They knew that alliances weren't just about treaties and promises. They were about trust, earned on the battlefield. In one pivotal campaign, a human fleet came to the aid of the Drawlax Commonwealth, a species on the verge of annihilation by a Skorran counteroffensive. The humans didn't just repel the attackers. They rebuilt the Drawlax defenses, shared their medical supplies, and evacuated civilians to safety. Word of these actions spread. The galaxy began to see humanity not just as warriors, but as protectors. For every ally lost to Skorran lies, two more came forward, willing to stand beside the humans. The coalition, now numbering over a dozen species, became a force to rival the Skorrans. Together, they launched coordinated strikes deep into enemy territory, dismantling supply lines, liberating occupied worlds, and turning the tide of the war. Humanity's greatest strength was not its technology or its military prowess. It was its ability to inspire others. They didn't seek to dominate their allies, but to uplift them. They shared their knowledge freely, teaching their partners how to adapt and innovate as they had. It was this spirit of cooperation that made the coalition so formidable. By the midpoint of the war, it was clear that humanity and its allies were no longer fighting for mere survival. They were fighting for a new galactic order, one where even the mightiest empires would think twice before preying on the weak. The Skorrans had lit the spark of conflict, but humanity had turned it into a fire that would reshape the galaxy forever. The final act of the war began over the Skorran homeworld, a place that had loomed large in the galaxy's imagination for millennia. Skorrat Prime was a monument to their dominance, a planet that radiated power and pride. Its skies were crowded with orbital defense stations and colossal shipyards, while its surface bristled with fortresses and military complexes. For centuries, the Skorrans had ruled from this seat of power, and they believed it was unassailable. But humanity and their coalition had come to prove them wrong. The combined fleet that gathered at the edge of the Skorran system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was a tapestry of species working together. Human dreadnoughts flanked by Caltheri stealth frigates, Rulath missile carriers, and Dralax fighter squadrons. The coalition's ships bore a variety of designs, colors, and symbols, but they moved as one, united by a common purpose. At the heart of the armada was humanity's flagship, Resolute Dawn, a massive vessel bristling with advanced weaponry and the latest in adaptive AI systems. The Skorrans were prepared, or so they thought. They had reinforced their fleets, recalling every available warship from across their empire. Thousands of vessels waited in formation, a wall of firepower between the Coalition and Skorran Prime. Behind them, planetary shields shimmered like an impenetrable barrier, bolstered by energy siphoned from the planet's core. When the Coalition fleet arrived, the Skorran High Command sent a single message: unconditional surrender would be the only acceptable outcome. Humanity's response came not in words, but in action. The battle began with a ferocity that shook the stars. Skorran ships surged forward, their guns blazing as they sought to break the Coalition's lines. But they quickly discovered that this was no ordinary enemy. Humanity's fleet formations were fluid, their ships moving with a precision that bordered on uncanny. Coordinated strikes targeted Skorran flagships, using pinpoint kinetic rounds and advanced energy weapons to exploit weaknesses in their armor. The Coalition didn't just match the Skorrans in firepower, they surpassed them in ingenuity. The Caltheri deployed cloaked drones that infiltrated enemy formations, sowing chaos and confusion. Rulath carriers launched wave after wave of long-range missiles, overwhelming Skorran point defenses. And at the center of it all were the humans, directing the battle with an almost surgical efficiency. The turning point came on the third day of the battle. Humanity unveiled a new weapon, a planetary assault platform that combined the destructive power of their molecular destabilizers with precision orbital bombardment. This platform, nicknamed Judgment, bypassed the Skorran planetary shields entirely, its energy beams tunneling through the atmosphere to strike critical infrastructure on the surface. Skorran Prime, once thought invincible, began to falter. Military installations crumbled, supply lines were severed, and the planetary shields flickered and failed. Skorran leadership, desperate to maintain control, ordered their remaining fleets to regroup for a final stand. But the Coalition was relentless. By the seventh day, the Skorran fleets were in disarray, their ships reduced to debris fields scattered across the system. The once proud defenses of Skorran Prime lay in ruins, and the planet itself burned under the weight of precision strikes. Despite the overwhelming victory, humanity showed restraint. Fleet Admiral Jonas Rourke, commander of the Coalition forces, broadcast a message to the surviving Skorran leaders and the galaxy at large. This war was never about conquest, Rourke declared, his image transmitted across every corner of known space. We fight not to destroy, but to ensure that no one suffers under tyranny again. Surrender now, and we will end this. Continue, and we will finish what you began. The Skorrans, broken and humiliated, had no choice but to surrender unconditionally. Their empire, once feared across the galaxy, was reduced to a shadow of its former self. Skorran Prime, the heart of their power, became a symbol not of dominance but of their hubris and the cost of underestimating humanity. The battle was over, but its impact would ripple across the stars for generations to come. Humanity and its coalition had not only won the war, they had reshaped the galaxy's future. The war ended, but its echoes were felt far and wide. The surrender of the Skorran Hegemony marked the collapse of one of the galaxy's most dominant powers, a shift that reverberated across every sector. For centuries, the Skorrans had stood as an unshakable pillar of strength, their empire unchallenged. Now, their fleets lay in ruins, their fortresses shattered, and their once proud homeworld scarred by the fire of retribution. As the Galactic Concord convened in the aftermath, humanity took its place at the forefront. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy gathered in a sprawling station orbiting a neutral world, their attention fixed on the humans who had so thoroughly rewritten the balance of power. The Concord, once a fractious assembly of species jockeying for influence, was now a different entity. It was humanity's coalition that had brought the galaxy together in the darkest of times, and now everyone wanted to hear what the humans had to say. Ambassador Elaine Carter, who had been the voice of humanity throughout the war, stood before the assembled species. She spoke not of vengeance or conquest, but of unity. The galaxy has suffered too long from cycles of war and domination, she said, her voice carrying the weight of conviction. What we achieved together was not merely a victory over the Skorrans, it was a demonstration of what we can accomplish when we stand united. This is our chance to build something better, not just for humanity, but for all of us. Her words resonated. Humanity's actions during the war had proven that they were not conquerors. They had fought fiercely, but they had never sought to impose their will on others. Instead, they had shared their technology, protected vulnerable species, and rebuilt what had been destroyed. The Coalition's victories had not been about humanity alone. They had been about a shared vision of a future where no species would have to live in fear. The proposals humanity brought to the Concord were revolutionary. They called for stricter regulations on the use of weapons of mass destruction, universal recognition of sovereignty for emerging species, and the establishment of a permanent peacekeeping force to prevent future conflicts. These ideas were met with initial skepticism. Many feared that humanity, now one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, would use these measures to cement their dominance. But humanity's actions spoke louder than their words. They imposed no punitive measures on the Skorrans beyond the dismantling of their military-industrial complex. They demanded no reparations, no territorial concessions. Instead, they focused on rebuilding the worlds that had been devastated by the war, Skorran worlds included. This commitment to peace and restoration won over even the most skeptical voices in the Concord. Slowly, one by one, the member species began to adopt humanity's proposals. A new era was dawning, one where cooperation would take precedence over conquest, and the galaxy would move toward a fragile but genuine unity. Yet, beneath the surface, the galaxy had changed in other ways. Stories of humanity's victories, their unyielding determination, and their terrifyingly efficient weapons spread far and wide. For every tale of their diplomacy, there was another of their military prowess. The fall of Arxon, the devastating assault on Skorat Prime, the sheer relentlessness of their strategy. The phrase "do not anger humanity" became a quiet mantra among the elder species. It wasn't just their weapons that frightened the galaxy, it was their resolve. Humanity had shown that they were willing to go to any length to protect themselves and their allies, and that when provoked, they could be as unyielding as a supernova. In the centuries that followed, humanity became both a beacon of hope and a warning. They were the ones who had reshaped the galaxy, proving that even the youngest species could rise to greatness. But they were also a reminder that power, when wielded with purpose, could topple even the mightiest empires. No species dared provoke them again, not out of fear alone, but out of respect. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy, not just as warriors but as builders, peacemakers, and leaders. The galaxy would never be the same, and it was humanity who had ensured that the future would be brighter for all who called it home.